Ethan had always believed that power did not need to be loud, it only needed to be consistent, invisible to the eyes of most people. While others shouted or rushed, he observed, listened, and waited. Most importantly, no one noticed how deeply he understood the situation. At first, he told himself he wanted power to maintain order, to ensure stability, to protect those around him. Perhaps, for the first months, that was true. He helped projects move forward, shielded colleagues from poor decisions, and earned respect slowly, patiently. People began to rely on him, to trust him. And trust is the first form of power. Among those people was Marcus, Ethan's opposite in nearly every way, charismatic, confident, impulsive, always ready to speak before thinking. Marcus attracted attention and opportunities, Ethan noticed, and for the first time, he felt a subtle discomfort, a quiet, rational envy. But Ethan was patient. He knew Marcus's impulsiveness would eventually bring consequences. He watched closely, noting small mistakes, hasty decisions, promises made too quickly. He remembered them without acting, storing them like a quiet weapon. Their world was about to shift in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. When the organization announced a major restructuring, Ethan and Marcus were placed on the same strategic initiative. Partners. The irony did not escape Ethan. Marcus saw collaboration, Ethan saw proximity. And proximity creates opportunity. At first, Ethan performed flawlessly, supportive, reliable, calm. He covered Marcus's mistakes without drawing attention, reframed poor decisions, softened consequences. Marcus trusted him completely. That trust weighed on Ethan silently, yet he convinced himself it was temporary, necessary, until the right moment came. Slowly, the line between protection and manipulation began to blur. The first real misstep of Marcus was not sabotage, it was omission. Ethan didn't lie, didn't destroy, he simply stayed silent. The result was noticeable, but not disastrous. Ethan observed, learning that controlled risk could outweigh intervention. Silence became strategy, and Marcus began to reveal exactly who he was, impulsive, fragile, replaceable. The organization responded predictably, more oversight for Marcus, more confidence in Ethan. Power arrived quietly, without fanfare. But with power came weight, the invisible responsibility that erodes from within. Every decision felt heavier, every interaction was calculated. People ceased to be human in Ethan's eyes, they became variables. Marcus noticed the growing distance and tried to reconnect, while Ethan experienced something unexpected, guilt. Brief, almost imperceptible, but enough to remind him of his humanity. Yet the path continued. The final opportunity arrived, a leadership position, a single role. Marcus believed in fairness, history, and trust, Ethan believed in results. When asked for input, Ethan spoke precisely, emphasizing stability, reliability, and risk management, without ever mentioning Marcus. The decision came swiftly, Ethan assumed the position, Marcus was reassigned. Courteous congratulations followed, but the air felt heavier, silent. In the weeks that followed, Ethan realized the true cost of power. It was not guilt but isolation, self-imposed. Conversations were filtered, opinions suppressed, honesty diminished. He had everything he wanted, yet something felt missing. Every silent choice, every calculated action reminded him of what he had lost. He revisited moments, gestures, omissions, and understood that the most dangerous betrayal was not against Marcus, it was against himself, against the principles he had once vowed to uphold. Ethan never lied. But he learned something far more important: truth without responsibility is just another form of domination. And real power is not measured by what you defeat, but by who you refuse to betray when you could. Fully aware of this, he began to exercise his influence differently, encouraging dissent, rewarding honesty, admitting mistakes, not dramatically, but consistently. Some were confused, others skeptical. Slowly, culture began to shift. He even reached out to Marcus. Not to apologize, but to listen, to acknowledge that the world he had built needed to be inhabitable, not just conquered. Years later, Ethan still held a position of influence, but differently. He knew power was merely an amplifier of character. He understood that every small silence, every omission, shaped not only others' perception but his own soul. And so, Ethan learned the most important lesson. True leadership, true power, is not about what you gain but about who you choose not to harm along the way. There is no glory in manipulation, no victory in destruction. True triumph lies in integrity, even when no one is watching, even when everything could be gained at the cost of conscience. Ethan had everything he thought he wanted, yet the weight of power settled like a stone in his chest. Each decision, no matter how small, seemed to echo through the office corridors, altering moods, shaping conversations, bending reality in subtle ways. He realized that influence was not about authority, it was about expectation. People expected him to be flawless, to be the calm center in storms he had once avoided. The burden grew heavier each day, but Ethan kept moving, silent, precise, observing. Marcus, in his reassigned position, slowly faded from Ethan's daily life, yet the memory of their partnership, and betrayal, haunted him. Ethan replayed every conversation, every silence, every unspoken word. He remembered the moment he could have spoken and changed everything, the tiny hesitation that made the rest inevitable. The office became a chessboard, and he was both player and prisoner of his own design. For the first time, Ethan wondered, was this truly leadership, or merely the art of controlling outcomes while sacrificing humanity? One evening, long after the office emptied, Ethan remained seated, staring at the shadows cast by his desk lamp. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the city outside. He reflected on Marcus's words, "Be careful what you build. You'll have to live inside it." The phrase echoed louder with every passing day. Ethan understood that the real consequences were not in promotions, authority, or accolades, they were in the people he had shaped, the silence he had allowed, and the ethical compromises he had made. Power, he realized, was not an external force. It was a mirror, reflecting every choice, every moral lapse. He began observing his team differently. Every hesitation, every subtle expression, every word left unsaid became meaningful. He noted patterns, who sought approval, who dared question him, who hid truths behind smiles. But unlike before, Ethan did not act immediately. He listened longer, waited, measured. He began seeing potential in those who were cautious, strength in those who dared to disagree, and weakness not in mistakes but in avoidance of responsibility. Power was not about dominance. It was about shaping an environment where honesty could survive. Then came the first real test. A critical project required a decision that could make or break the company's reputation. Ethan had multiple options, each carrying risk. Marcus would have rushed, driven by confidence. Most others deferred, intimidated by responsibility. Ethan paused, considered every angle, reflected on every principle he once held, and made the choice that prioritized integrity over expedience. It worked. But not flawlessly. Small errors occurred. Minor complaints surfaced. Some colleagues murmured doubts. Yet, because Ethan had acted with transparency, the mistakes became lessons rather than disasters. For the first time, he realized that real power was not measured by flawless execution but by the courage to act honestly under scrutiny. This approach transformed the office. People began to speak freely, to raise concerns without fear of reprisal. Some resisted, fearing the shift from silent obedience to accountable dialogue. Others flourished. Ethan found satisfaction not in accolades but in witnessing growth, in nurturing a space where decisions carried meaning beyond mere authority. The weight of power remained, but it no longer isolated him, it connected him, not through dominance, but through shared responsibility. Months passed, and Ethan's leadership style became more pronounced. He encouraged mistakes as long as lessons were learned. He rewarded honesty, admitted personal errors, and modeled accountability. Colleagues who once feared silence now spoke, debated, and challenged each other constructively. The office environment shifted from a tense battlefield to a place where human strengths and weaknesses could coexist, where trust was not naive but intentional, deliberate, and resilient. Ethan saw Marcus's absence not as a loss but as a lesson in restraint, patience, and the importance of building systems that outlast individuals. One afternoon, a new challenge arose. A junior colleague made a bold proposal that contradicted the majority opinion. In the past, silence would have been expected. Ethan listened, asked questions, examined motives, and allowed the idea to proceed with careful oversight. The result was a success far beyond expectations. The young colleague gained confidence, the team gained respect for accountability, and Ethan quietly realized the full scope of his influence, not as a ruler, but as a cultivator of potential. This understanding changed him. He no longer saw leadership as the accumulation of power but as the stewardship of possibility. Years later, Ethan reflected on the arc of his journey. He remembered Marcus, the quiet betrayals, the lessons in restraint, and the consequences of silence. He understood that true leadership, and true power, are measured not by victories or losses, but by the moral choices made along the way, by the courage to maintain integrity even when expedience offers easier rewards. Power magnifies character, it does not create it. Those who misuse it reveal themselves through their actions, just as those who wield it responsibly strengthen the world around them. Ethan had learned that lesson the hard way, and he had chosen to live by it, consistently, every day. Finally, in a quiet moment, Ethan understood something vital: every decision, every silence, every act of restraint or courage carries consequences far beyond immediate results. Leadership is not a trophy, it is a responsibility. Power is not conquest, it is reflection. And integrity, once preserved in small choices, accumulates into a life that can inspire others. He had not only survived the trials of ambition and betrayal. He had transformed them into lessons for himself and for those who would follow. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of power, but now also the quiet joy of knowing he had used it wisely, and that wisdom, not dominance, would outlast everything else. The way a colleague's hesitation spoke volumes, the almost imperceptible tension in conversations, the small moments when truth struggled to rise above fear. He learned to anticipate, not manipulate, those moments. To understand that power was not simply about control, but about perception, trust, and consequence. One evening, a situation arose that tested everything Ethan had learned. A high-stakes negotiation with a partner company had gone awry due to misinformation and overconfidence. The team panicked, and everyone turned to Ethan for guidance. Marcus's old charisma might have rushed in, claimed authority, and swept through with superficial confidence. But Ethan paused. He assessed, recalibrated, asked questions, and let the team contribute without fear. Hours passed, small corrections were made, subtle compromises reached. By the end, the deal was salvaged, not because he dominated, but because he guided, restrained, and listened. The lesson was clear. True leadership amplifies the intelligence and conscience of others, rather than imposing dominance. But Ethan was not free from inner conflict. The ghosts of previous choices, times he had remained silent, moments he had allowed ambition to override conscience, haunted him. He reflected on Marcus often. Marcus had been more than a colleague, he had been a mirror. And mirrors do not lie. Each reflection reminded Ethan that leadership without morality was an empty shell. The weight of those reflections pressed on him, shaping every decision, every word, every hesitation. The silence of his office became a canvas on which he painted strategies, not for manipulation, but for integrity. Over the next months, Ethan implemented subtle changes throughout the organization. Meetings began with space for dissent, project plans required accountability checkpoints, and recognition shifted from visible victories to the quiet acknowledgement of ethical decision-making. Some resisted, clinging to old patterns of fear and obedience. Others thrived, emboldened by trust. The office itself began to breathe differently, a living ecosystem where honesty could survive, where mistakes were learning points rather than threats, and where influence was not wielded but shared. Ethan watched quietly, learning that the measure of power is not who obeys, but who flourishes under it. In a particularly reflective moment, Ethan revisited the documents from his earliest days in the office. The notes on Marcus, the records of minor errors. Every future choice would honor his conscience first, and power second. Years passed, and Ethan became a mentor rather than a ruler. Young colleagues sought his guidance not because of fear, but because of respect. Leadership became a living philosophy rather than a position of dominance. And though challenges arose, unexpected crises, failures, betrayals, Ethan faced them with a calm clarity born from experience. He no longer feared mistakes, he feared dishonesty, both in others and in himself. The office had transformed under his influence, quietly and sustainably. The people he had once seen as variables were now collaborators, thinkers, contributors. On one quiet evening, Ethan received a message from Marcus. It was brief: "I see the world you've built. It's better than I imagined." Ethan smiled, not from pride, but from understanding. Marcus's respect was earned, not demanded. And in that moment, Ethan realized something crucial: the true legacy of power is invisible. It is measured not by conquest, but by the lives it shapes without breaking them, by the integrity it preserves in silence, by the lessons it leaves for others. Ethan closed his office door, sat back in his chair, and reflected. Every decision, every silence, every calculated action had led to this, an understanding that power magnifies character, reveals truth, and teaches consequences. He had once sought dominance, and it had weighed heavily on him. Now, having chosen responsibility over convenience, honesty over expedience, he felt a quiet triumph. Not one of applause or recognition, but one of conscience aligned with action. And for the first time, power felt light, not because it was diminished, but because it had been transformed into purpose.